Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our past, present, and future of specifications webinar. We appreciate all you guys coming today. I'm your host, Greg Jackman, the Specification Program Specialist here at Watts. Today's webinar is the next installment in our series of webinars specifically designed for you guys, our engineer, architect, and specifier customers. Rebecca, next slide. Just to give you guys a little bit of background on our Watts Works Engineer Webinar Series, we hold several webinars throughout the course of the year that cover a variety of topics. Our presenters are in-house technology and product experts, and thanks to our partnership with ASPE, we're able to offer you the 0.1 CEU credit if you stick around for the entire webinar. And Rebecca, can you advance the slide? Okay, so in this webinar, we'll be presenting to you through our partnership with Allied Technical Solutions, or ATS. Our presenters, as you can see, are Rebecca Perullo, Director of Customer Experience, and Zach Allison, our National Account Manager. Rebecca works with specifiers and manufacturers to connect specifiers' needs with products available in the market. Over the past 12 years, she's connected with stakeholders in the construction industry, which has given her a strong understanding of the importance of specifications. And with 10 years of working with mechanical engineers, Zach's goal is to really help and solve issues with your projects and save you time on the job site. He has a strong understanding of product application and building code, and has made his support vital to engineering firms across North America. And finally, myself, my name is Greg Jackman. I'm the Specification Program Specialist at Watts. I oversee the development, execution, and measurement of Watts's specification programs designed to support you guys, our engineer and design community. So just during the course of the presentation today, the phone lines will be muted, but we encourage you guys to submit questions via the chat window. You just hover over the chat icon at the bottom of the WebEx, and you can type in your question there. And then we'll be addressing those questions during and after the presentation. So we want to keep this session interactive, light, and engaging. So we're going to try and open up the phone lines at the end of the presentation. You guys can shout out your questions if you'd like. If there's too much background noise, I can try and mute people, but we'll just wing it like that. So all that said, I'm going to pass it off to Rebecca to get started.
Thank you, Greg. And thank you, everybody who has joined us this morning. Over the next about half an hour, Zach and myself are going to kind of walk you through the complexities and challenges of writing specifications and not only identifying some issues, but trying to provide some solutions to make the process easier. So we'll go through the purpose of a specification, challenges with specifications today, the evolution of the process, some tips and tricks, some sample specifications, why it's important to hold a spec, and then how we can help you and how to get started. So by the end of this, I'm hoping that you will either strengthen your understanding of technology that's available in developing specifications, clearly articulate the challenges in interpreting specifications that are out in the field, as well as some techniques and some technology to help you with these challenges. So purpose of a specification. The purpose of a specification is to lay out building requirements in a clear and concise manner so that the contractors have clear indications of what they need to do and what the owner is expecting them to do with the design and the construction of the building. The goal is for the owner group and subcontractors to have a list of research and information that involves how the building is going to be constructed and what regulations and rules it has to comply with, so both at the national, state, and county level. And the way that we see it is that there's 5 different types of specifications, And throughout the market, each type of specification is used for specific applications. So the first that we identify is the base bid specification, where there is only one name, one number listed. And this is probably seen about 10% of the time. Base bid specifications with savings is where the mechanical or consulting engineer is providing information in the tender and is accepting of alternatives as long as there is a cost saving. One name with alternative is where the product is specified by name and number, and the engineer includes the alternative manufacturers. And this is what we see as the most prevalent or most popular type of specification. But one that follows very closely is the idea where an engineer calls out by model number and by manufacturer the three specific alternatives for everything that they specify. And then one that we're not seeing as often, especially in private projects, is anything where it's descriptive, where you're just giving a description of the product without actually naming any manufacturers or any model numbers. We have a poll question because we want to know how is your office writing their specifications?
Yep, we have our first poll here. You should see on the right side of the WebEx, which type best describes how your office writes specifications? We'll give it another 10, 15 seconds, and I'll post the results.
So with speaking with contractors, speaking with engineers, with product manufacturers, what we found that problems with specifications today is it's sometimes too brief and there's not enough information. There's typically a lot of abbreviations or too much jargon, so it requires sometimes investigation or confirmation of what they're actually trying to convey. And sometimes there's not enough details. And again, somebody has to go back and try and understand what the initial intent was. And there's too many opportunities for people to interpret what they're reading differently.
Rebecca, I just posted the poll results.
Okay.
Like 24% said names are equal.
Okay. The other challenges can be that from a specifier's point of view, they're so focused on the building and itself, the overall layout, the piping, that potentially some of the plumbing specifications is left to the very last minute and has to be turned around pretty quickly. Another challenge is relying on previous projects and using some masters or that are in the office library, which can lead to either products that are no longer available or just in general provide some inaccurate information. Another challenge can be, especially if you're not including alternatives in the actual documentation, is the contractors, the distributors, wholesalers, other people that are involved in the construction of the project are providing alternatives that don't really match the original product that was specified, are not a true equivalent. And then the last one is, sometimes because of the relationship and the support that you do get from manufacturers or from other vendors in general, that you can that you'll focus on writing specifications based off of their products that, depending on how it's written, can create confusion in the documentation and in the interpretation of it. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Zach to talk about the evolution of the spec process.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. So yeah, back in the 1970s and in the olden day, from our perspective, really it was the spec process really started changing around then. Back in that time, the 60s and 70s, really for years before that, you see this. You see stacks of paper shown on the right here, generally copied from manuals, actually done by hand, back before even the photocopier came around, and actual cutting and pasting. And in fact, that's how our ATS spec company got started, with actual cutting and pasting, as the original founder, Lou, built his own manual. Really, it's kind of a lost art when we think back to it. Engineers would manually copy information from a manufacturer's manual into their own written spec, and then hand draw the information on the drawings. Really, some of my favorite meetings and calls to engineers, back when we could go visit engineers in their office, was when you drop in and see. Really, this is kind of true all across America with the different calls that I've been on in different territories. Eventually, you come across the wily vet of the office, and they would school you a bit on the history and where things had come from over the years. They'd walk you over and show you that they still have their drafting table sometimes, and show you how to use their scale rulers and their special red pens for all the markups. Definitely a different world back then on how to put it together. And in that day, you would have teams within a firm, whole teams dedicated to manually writing their complete spec, as well as a large office library whose focus is on ensuring the firm had all the information that they needed. These days, we're seeing library space is consistently being reduced in offices all across America. So really quite a change in the amount, especially in spatial allocation. And on the next slide, we see some of the older pictures, and realize that we can still learn a lot from those wily vets. They were able to take information from an old manual like this, and this is one of the old Watts regulator manuals that we found some photos of, and they were able to take that information and build effective plumbing designs from it. So it's kind of funny to compare that to where we are now with our 3D models and our online tools and pipe sizing tools online, trench drain configurations, and all sorts of other tools that are available to us as engineers now, or 3D Revit tools that have all that information embedded within the file and built right into their parameters. So only 50 years ago, we were here trying to make sense of this information and build our designs out of it. And the change really started to happen as technology flows started to change. In the late 80s and early 90s, the floppy disk came around. I think we've got some of the images on the next slide. And the industry started to move away from those paper manuals to new and improved options. As funny as it is to really think of the floppy disk as an improved technology, it was light years ahead of the delivery of information that we had prior to it, and how we saw the delivery of information change as resources for information and technology started to improve. Actually, the first version of the ATS spec tool, our online program, was created on CD-ROM. And just like the floppy disk, and when manufacturers started putting manuals on CD-ROMs, it would need a digital update every year. Now that digital update is really a direct replacement, because as soon as, just like an actual paper manual, as soon as these floppy disks or USB drives were delivered, they're out of date. Because as soon as the information is put on there, a manufacturer could change a model number, a space of a carrier could change. Any of these little pieces of information could be updated and out of date almost immediately. Now, there would still be a dedicated spec department that's taking the information from these floppy disks and spending hundreds or thousands of hours a year converting that information into a written spec. And generally, we started seeing that firms would have kind of a Word master spec file that they could start to pull from. And we'll take a look at the next slide and show how really technology is pushing the change once again. The 90s to now almost seems like a blink of an eye. Really, once the internet came around, it kind of shifted everything. And there's all sorts of history of information technology courses you could take online. And if you're spending some of your alone pandemic time on learning more, there's online learning tools that I sure have courses on this. But once the internet came around to now, it's just been a lightning shift. Information is being kept current, and accuracy and access is increasing every year. Importantly, we started to see a shift in the industry from manufacturers and the reps pushing information to the engineer to engineers looking to request or pull information direct from the manufacturer's website. The organization and access of this information has changed greatly over the years, as well as the format that the information is delivered in. I remember when I started, one of my first visits was with an engineer that was still using WordPerfect. And that was over a decade ago now. And it was amazing then that they were still working in that. But now we have PDF and Excel and CAD and all sorts of other programs. And of course, Word specs still being required. Engineering firms, many of them, and of all different sizes, began switching away from a large specification department that solely focuses on writing specs to the designers and project managers editing and writing their own spec and doing this on a job-by-job basis. Maybe they would still utilize a master file to get them started, but the expectation began to shift that that they and their team would organize their spec for their own project with approvals and reviews, of course, from the principals or the seniors on the team. They would still lend their experience and make sure that it's meeting their company standards. And of course, shortly after the switch to CAD and we start getting these computer programs, we start seeing the shift to 3D design. And we see the push of technology moving us into even more detail. Firms had really begun to learn how to integrate BIM and Revit technology into their projects since the mid to late 2000s. It allowed some firms to improve accuracy in their designs and reduce time on site when done properly. Now, this is really still being figured out in a sense. A number of firms across North America, even though this program has been around for 10, 20 years, are still figuring out how they want to use it within their firm. We see some firms integrating it into their design process, and they may have seen great results because of it. Others that are still just using it at really a basic level, almost like a CAD 2D drawing, but with improved information in the parameters. But the most important aspect of BIM is the growth. Firms have seen the capabilities and efficiencies of designing in 3D or in BIM improve every year. It's constantly improving, constantly upgrading, constantly changing. And primarily, this allows for improved communication, which is something we're all striving for right now. Improved communication between all the different stakeholders on a project, from the architect and the engineer to the contractor, owner, and even the manufacturer. Everyone being able to work off of a single file. And the ability to collaborate on a file and, importantly, reduce costly errors on site. That has increased every year. And we're finding this drive for improved efficiency and quicker answers and, most important, collaboration. On the next slide, Rebecca. Seeing this drive for the efficiency, rapidity of answers, and collaboration between all decision makers has led to changes in how manufacturers are looking to provide their information, as well as driving change in the tools that these design professionals are using in their day-to-day on all the project builds. So I'll pass it over to Rebecca to review some of these new tools and some tips for getting a cleaner, more concise specification.
Thank you, Zach. I think that collaboration is probably the most important right now, as those of us that are at home. How do we communicate? How do we still work together, even though we're physically not in the presence of each other? So I think this is probably more important now than it's ever been. So we'll go into tips to writing a clean specification. And the first one is application. Considering what the building is going to be used for and any specific requirements that the building will need based off of how it's going to be used. A hospital is going to need very different things than a community center. And the budget for an office versus a hospital is going to be completely different. And also thinking of how the manufacturer intended to use that product. If their product was for something with low traffic and you're putting it into an airport, the challenge that once installed that building owner, that facility owner may have because of a product being used too much can really cause challenges with the life cycle of that building. The next is structure. So determining what type of specification is also important as how you actually write it, what you include in there, especially when we're talking about plumbing fixtures. If you don't add everything that would need to be installed together, there's a chance that either it doesn't get considered until everything is on site, which can cause huge delays for projects. Code is also very important, whether you're talking about at a national level, the state level, the county, or the city. Most recently, the U.S. federal government made changes to the Buy American Act. So understanding if you're working on a federal building, the design for it, how that changes to the Buy American Act can affect the specification that you write is important, and the product to select. So some examples. So we talk about being precise. So the idea of, I'm just going to read it out because I think it's the best way to understand. So in one specification, we had general location and arrangement, drawing plans and details indicate general location and arrangement of underground storm and drainage piping systems. Location and arrangement of storm water systems is critical, and design consideration should be taken into account. Install stormwater systems as indicated herein and as directed by product manufacturers to maximum extent practical. Where specific installation procedure is not indicated, follow product manufacturer's written instructions. What could have been written is just install in accordance with manufacturer's instructions. So making it clear, precise.
All right, we have our second poll now. Let me open it up. Which manufacturer's products do you specify? No judgment.
And specifically, we're asking questions about drains because we saw an example of a product description for a trench drain. And again, I'm going to read it word for word. It said 25 feet overall, 3 sections, 2 end sections at 10 feet, and a center section at 5 with 4-inch center drain outlet sections to bolt together with gasket. Depth to start at 2 inches, slope of 1/8 of an inch per foot, heel-proof grate and secured grate. So when you read that description, technically there's a couple of different solutions that could be provided. But if you had written a more detailed product description, then what you would have had was include information like the material and some specific product requirements so that you know you're looking for a type 34 stainless steel trench drain, 25 feet overall, 3 sections, 2 end sections at 10 feet, and a center section at 5 and 4 feet, centered drain outlet section to bolt together with gasket, depth to start at 2 inches, and a slope of 1/8 of an inch per foot, with an ANSI CS-8 non-slip cast, heel-proof secured grate. So you go from potentially allowing a contractor to have 3 different French drains they could choose to just one.
See the poll results here. We got a lot of Watts, Zern, and J.R. Smith.
Talking about Watts and J.R. Smith, the other thing that we saw, not just with the type of specifications, but the idea of adding alternatives. We do recommend writing a specification with alternative, as it eliminates confusion and eliminates interpretation. But we recommend going one step further, where you should include a really strong description of the product and then the actual recommended alternatives by model number and by manufacturer. So then there isn't a question about what product you need for that specific location in the building. Another way to eliminate some of the confusion is if you do your project in 3D design. Answer that question.
Third poll here. Oh, we'll back up one slide, Rebecca. Third poll, how often does your firm use Revit? Poll is open. We'll give it a few more seconds.
I think this is one of the more interesting questions, because I do find there's a huge variability on how much Revit is used. So it's interesting to see how this poll comes back.
Yes.
It's pretty evenly split.
Yeah.
Very few that aren't doing it on any jobs, which is, I think if we ran that poll a couple of years ago, there would have been a lot more people that really wouldn't have used it at all. So it just shows the change that's coming.
Right. Next poll here. What specification software does your office use? We'll go to poll 4. Rebecca. There we go. And it up. I believe there was a question earlier about BSD SpecLink, and it looks like Zach, you responded to that. Yeah, Watts uses our specification tool SpecHub that I'll get to in a little bit. But right now, you can see polls open right now, and I will close it out. 2 seconds. Interesting.
And I think this will be an interesting one as well, because I think firms likely are using more than one tool. There's many firms that are subscribed to a tool, but a lot of manufacturers coming in with free tools now as well. So there's a lot of options out there.
Yeah, the results are up now. 22% are using master spec. We had about 60 people responding there.
So Revit is a way to write your specifications and work on your design. One of the important parts that we recommend you not forget is the I, or the information in BIM. A lot of times, some of the Revit families don't have all the parameters or all of the product details in them because of the size of a file could potentially be. But the challenge with that is long term, when you want to use the Revit models for maintaining the building and potentially looking at replacement parts, if you don't have all the parameters, if you don't have all the product information in there, then the details, that product information that you need is not available digitally. I think we have one last poll question.
And as this poll question is going on, Rebecca, we had a good point come on from chat on federal projects in regards to, making sure you get the type of product you want, but you can't be specific and exclusionary. So can you give a couple of maybe key points to highlight a performance-based spec like that?
So when what we've seen as best practices for writing performance specifications is still writing a specification with a manufacturer and a product in mind, from how you want the product to perform. So the idea is that we've seen some manufacturers or some engineers literally just remove the manufacturer and the model number from their specification, but the rest of the details, the size, the material, the flow rate, the grate, the angle of the grate, all of that information is still in there. Any specific requirements from a testing or certification standpoint, like specific ANSI or the Canadian market CSA approvals, in keeping that information in the product details. So it's more of, this is the standard that this product must match. So
yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think you might call it key features as well. Like, again, you don't necessarily want to specifically say, thinking of a Watts carrier, like a lav carrier, you might want to ensure that they have adjustability. So you may not call for the specific model number of a Watts track lav carrier, but you might call for adjustability in the features of that description. So I think you're right, thinking of a specific manufacturer product that you would like, but boiling it down to what are those key features that is informing your decision. Why do you want that product? And then highlighting those. And then any manufacturer that has those key features would be appropriate. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you for the question. Good question.
Yes, thank you. And the poll results are up here. Looks like the majority, 40% of respondents said manufacturer website. People going to BIM augmenting.
So we thought we would run through a sample specification. Maybe for the next time we give this presentation, maybe we do a federal building so that we can show how to best write a performance specification, even though they're probably one of the hardest. But so in this instance, again, we're thinking of application, and it was a healthcare, it was the Oregon Health and Science University Hospital, and this 15-story hospital in Portland, Oregon was having some challenges with the domestic hot water. It seemed like there was a lot of temperature creep in between the times when it wasn't being used. And the challenge that the maintenance staff was having was keeping on top of balancing the mixing valve and ensuring that there wasn't an opportunity for Legionella growth in the water lines or in the faucets. You can imagine in a hospital, the last thing you want to do is introduce bacteria or the potential of bacteria to patients. So the solution was ensuring the installation and the specification of a digital mixing valve, which adjusted for the lack of use of water during certain times in the building and could self-adjust itself. So what was written was the digital mixing valve with a touch screen that had that would ensure that the water does not adjust in temperature by a plus or minus of 2 degrees Fahrenheit, and was in accordance with ASSE 1017. And would also connect with the BAC, or the building automation platform, to make it easier for the maintenance staff to kind of regulate what was going on in the hospital. But it was very specific to find a solution that met that need that that hospital had. By building a project in Revit, you can also make sure that you include, again, all of the parts and pieces that are required for a system. So not just thinking about the hot water tank, but ensuring that you have the mixing valve and the water filtration system, again, for this hospital. So why is it important to hold a specification? This really comes down to an engineer. As an engineer, you're spending weeks, if not months, on designing this building. You're looking at performance, you're looking at the code, and you are in charge of your design. You don't spend all this time to allow another product to come in without your consent, without your approval. You work with the owner at stages of the project to make sure that the design is met, the design intent, and that you're meeting the needs of the owner. So you need to really be careful and ensure that as it goes into construction, that your initial intent, that all of your design requirements are being met. So while cost savings, especially in today's world, is important, you want to make sure that that cost savings is not at the expense of your design, of the intention and the need of that building. With that, I'm going to pass it off to Greg.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. So I just want to take a brief minute here to go over how Watts can help you with your specifications with the use of SpecHub, our project specification tool that we referred to earlier. I'm sending a link to the sign-up page in the chat box if you want to register and start playing around with it. Rebecca, can you click it to the next slide? So we launched SpecHub earlier this year. So with this tool, you're able to quickly, emphasis on quickly, create projects and specs, submittal packages, plumbing schedules, and easily share that information with your colleagues. So the most significant benefit of the tool is really its speed. You're going to be able to, quickly specify and select Watts products according to building requirements and code, in line to wherever your project is. It's going to save you time researching that product info and data that you need because it's already in the tool. It's going to save you time gathering all the BIM, CAD, Revit type files because once you're done building out your project or spec, the tool is going to automatically generate those docs that you need. You can download them and then share them with your coworkers as well. So all that said, I just wanted to kind of point out the elephant in the room here. When I go to sign up for things in online or anything, my hesitation, I'm always concerned about getting spammed or like bombarded with emails that I don't care about. So I just wanted to reassure everyone that our team at Watts and ATS, we consider this every single day. We're very mindful, very careful in how we approach our communications with you. We obviously want to respect your time. So we really strive to send you things that we think would be of direct interest to you, as professional engineers, architects, and design build contractors. So yes, you periodically will receive emails from us. You always have the option to opt out, of course. But I just want to throw that out there because I know I've talked with many of you guys in the field, our engineering customers for the past few years, and so it's very annoying to receive those irrelevant and excessive emails. So I just wanted to point that out, and I just don't want that to be the reason that you don't check out SpecHub, because we believe we could be potentially missing out on an opportunity that a tool that could really benefit you and just make your job easier. Next slide. So I just wanted to circle back to the three main objectives of this webinar, that we hope you now have a better understanding of how technology has changed the process of developing and managing specifications. You have a better understanding of the challenges in interpreting specifications in the field. And we hope you've learned more techniques to leverage technology to overcome those challenges in the field as well. And you can click to the next slide. So right before we get to the chat questions and open up the phone lines, I just wanted to mention, if you'd like to book a demo of SpecHub, you can email spechub@watts.com. Or if you have any questions about the tool, you can email me, gregory.jackman@wattsware.com, Rebecca@atspec.com, or Zach, Zach@atspec.com for more of your general specification-related tech questions. So let me just look in the chat box here. I know we addressed some of the questions during the presentation. I do see one question here. I've logged into SpecHub. Is there a way to reach out if I need immediate help? So if you're in the tool right now, there's a live chat feature at the bottom right. It's going to be a live person on the other end that can address any questions. They're available, normal business hours, 8 to 5 Eastern time. That's going to get you the most immediate response on your question.
One of the questions that... Sorry, go ahead, Rebecca.
I was just going to add, that person on the other end is also pretty well versed on Watts products in general. So whether it's a question about the software itself or a question about the product that you're looking to specify, that individual should be able to help you. If not, they can find the right product expert at Watts to get you that product information that you need, so you really have confidence in what you're specifying.
Good point.
Yeah,
one of the earlier questions I wanted to highlight was one coming in saying that their firm subscribes to BSS SpecLink and asking, does Watts or does ATS, tie into that paid-for software? So that question's come up, very consistently over the years. ATS and the Watts SpecHub itself are free tools that are designed specifically for the engineering society or the engineering group. And while I do believe that Watts would be included already in your master spec, your spec or your BSS SpecLink, the Watts product info is definitely going to be there. It's not as current and up to date, and it's not necessarily as specific to your job as using SpecHub would be. So BSD and your master spec format would be more kind of your company master in a sense. And, I've seen engineers go through the process of trying to remove the products that maybe are not being used on this job. Whereas the SpecHub is more about finding that couple of products that you need specifically for a job. So you would still use your BSS SpecLink for your general written spec, and then you could use SpecHub or ATS to find the specific products that you're looking for that individual project. And the output formats from SpecHub do match the output format that you would be getting from Master Spec or your SpecLink. I believe that's correct, right, Rebecca? And then another question came up on output formats, and I'll tie this over to you, Rebecca, because I know you're doing a lot of the future planning for where we're going in the future of output formats. And they were asking about whether or not we had like a performance-based spec that they could just download. Is that an option? What do they do if they're using SpecHub or ATS, and they want to get a performance-based spec.
Rebecca, I think you might be on mute.
Thank you for that. So if we are talking about a performance-based written specification, the customized written specifications that you're receiving from SpecHub or the ATS Spec solution it's written in a way where removing the manufacturer model number and the call out of the manufacturer is pretty easy. It's no longer kind of embedded in the three-part specification. It's at the bottom of each product that you select, so it's easy to remove it. From a schedule or a Revit file standpoint, it would require quite a amount of editing. As you can imagine, a drain schedule, a backflow schedule, we embed that information into the chart, but then into the actual schedule. But then again, the manufacturer and the model number are their own unique column. So you technically could just remove those two. So getting it is a lot easier than potentially some other tools have had it in the past, so that you can just keep the description and the performance that you require for each one of the products that you're selecting in the platform for your project specification.
And we had a question or a comment come through here in the Q&A. I know it's not really part of this, but when we spec a fixture, say a drain, how can we know how to write the correct number with all the prefix and suffix and know how many options can be used?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Sure. I know it's not really part of this, but when we spec a fixture, say a drain, how can we know how to write the correct number with all the prefix and suffix and know how many options can be used?
Okay, so the way that the platform works, you don't have to worry so much about the physical prefix. What you need to identify is how you need that product to perform, or what specific design features, example, type size, or you want clamps on a drain. Going to check off or select what you want that product to do, and then the system will auto-generate the model number that you're looking for. So you don't need to worry about the -4, -C in that drain or any one of those other products. I hope that answers it.
Yes, thank you. Those are all the chat questions we have right now. I'm going to try to open up the phone lines. We'll see how much noise we get. If anyone has a question, feel free to shout them out.
I'm going to go out and check on that.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. We'll give you guys a few more seconds. If you have any other questions, please submit them in the chat. I think we should be.
A question about how we deliver the CEU credit. Maybe you could touch on that, Greg.
Yes, yeah, I was responding to that, but the CEU credit will be emailed to you in the next few days. We have a record that you attended the webinar, so yeah, they'll be emailed to you.
I don't know if we answered this question about certification, but in SpecHub, you can search for products based off of certifications, and then that information will appear both in the platform and the documents that you download, whether it's a schedule, a written specification, or manufacturer spec sheets. That information is available.
Very good. So if that's all the questions, I'll just wrap it up. I'd like to thank Rebecca and Zach and everyone who's joined us today on the call. Like I said, the CEU credit will be emailed to you along with a recording of this webinar. Also, once this WebEx ends, it'll bring you to the SpecHub sign-up page if you want to register and start playing around with the tool. And again, that chat feature is a key feature in the tool if you need any help while you're building out your projects and your specs. So that's all we got. Thank you all again for joining, and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks for having us, Greg. And I would say as well, there was a lot of questions about how to integrate SpecHub and ATS. So if that comes up, Rebecca and I are happy to help, even in a one-on-one session or a firm-specific session. So thanks for having us, and thanks for your time, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Perfect. Thank you.